The Agenda with Steve Paikin is presented by
Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life. Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca.
And joining us now on the line from Durham, North Carolina, Dan Ariely. He is professor of behavioral economics at Duke University. Dan, how are you tonight?
I'm delightful. Thank you for asking.
I'm glad to hear that. You've written a book called Predictably Irrational, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, so let's just start there. What is predictable irrationality?
So it turns out that when we make mistakes, and we all make mistakes from time to time, these are not random. You know, economists used to think that if one person makes one mistake and another person makes another mistake, they will cancel each other out. But as it turns out, this is not the nature of mistakes. Instead, we all make the same mistakes over and over, and different people make mistakes, the same mistakes over and over, and that, of course, compounds in the market rather than eliminates the problem.
Indeed, this is particularly a germane phenomenon given the economic troubles we all find ourselves in these days. So let me follow up on that. Your book deals with behavioral economics. What makes behavioral economics different from, say, regular economics?
So in standard economics, people assume that people are rational. Everybody is rational, and as a consequence, what we have in the reality, in the market, is an optimal behavior, it is an equilibrium behavior. Instead, in behavioral economics, we don't make any assumptions about how people behave. We just say, let's experiment, let's find out how people actually behave. And what we do is we put people into different tests, sometimes lab tests, sometimes field tests, and we see how people behave. And as a consequence, and because we find that often people do not succumb to the prediction or assumption of rational economic theory, we have very different prescription and descriptions. And you know, this year has been a terrible year for the economy. There's very little good to say about this year from the economic perspective. The one light of ray is that it's been very good for behavioral economics. So when Greenspan came in front of Congress and basically said, oops, sorry, I thought rationality would save us, and it didn't, it got a lot of people thinking that maybe our discipline, behavioral economics, which was always kind of an ugly stepchild of economics, maybe it has something more important to do.
But again, on the face of it, it sounds like it doesn't make sense that people wouldn't be guided by making rational choices. So why would we not be guided by rational choices?
Well, so there are many reasons. It turns out that there's one way to be rational, and there are many ways to be irrational. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's think about emotions, for example. And emotions are kind of strange, and they're not a part of the economic theory. Now, imagine you were an animal in the jungle 3,000 years ago. You're walking around, and you saw a tiger. What do you want to do? Do you want to start saying to yourself, what's the cost of running? What's the benefit of running? Why should I stay? Should I go? Let me take all the options, consider them, and decide what to do? No. What you want is a system that takes overthinking, that replaces thinking with something that gives you a simple commandment that says, run as fast as you can. That's what emotions do. They don't start from within us. They start from the outside world. And once they invoke something into us, it's almost like an executable program. We just do it. Now, we still have emotions, even though we don't have that many tigers running around. Now we have other things. We get upset when somebody cuts in front of us in line. We get upset at home. We get emotion invoked when we go to the supermarket and we smell the smell of fresh baked goods. All of those things evoke emotion in us. Replace thinking with something different, which is an executable plan, and it has nothing to do with rationality. So that's one example of something that is just not a part of the economic theory, but you can think about how from an evolutionary sense would be perfectly reasonable. Let me give you another example. It turns out that we human beings are social animal. The economic theory is basically a selfish theory. It says that I would try to maximize my own self, and by doing that you would maximize society welfare. But here is an interesting experiment we call the trust game. So I'll tell you about the trust game with revenge, and what it means for the stock market. Here's the trust game. You have two players, player A and player B. You give both of them $10, and you say, look, if player A decides to go home, you both go home, the day is over, you each made $10. If player A decides, they can send their $10 to player B. When player B gets it, magically the money quadruples. So if player A sends it to player B has now $50. The 10 they got from player A, which quadrupled to be 40, plus the original 10. Now player B can decide to go home with $50, A would go home with nothing, or they can decide to send $25 back to player A, in which case they each will have $25 and everybody will be happy. Now, if you're player A and you don't see player B, you don't know who they are, would you think that they would give you back the money? If you're rational, if they were rational, you would say never. Player B will never give me the money back, so I'll never send him the money. And if you do send him the money, he will not give you the money if you're rational. But the good news is people are too trusting and too reciprocating. There's a good chance that player A will give the money to player B, and there's a good chance that player B will give back half the money to player A. So this is actually a result in which people are kind of nicer than economic theory would predict. Economic theory would predict everybody will go home with $10. In reality, they will both go home with $25. That's one point. The second point is, imagine yourself in the position of player A. You gave the money to player B, and player B left without giving you the money. And now I give you a choice, and I say, look, I know you just lost $10, but for every dollar you would give me, the experimenter, from your own checking account, I will find player B and I will take $2 away from them. Now think about it. If it was you and somebody just walked away with your money, would you spend some of your own money to take revenge at that other person?
You might be inclined to do that.
You might be inclined to do it. In fact, it's very easy to sit on your couch and not really think about how you would feel at the moment of betrayal. But at the moment of betrayal, many people are willing to do that. And more interestingly, there was a study in Switzerland showing that when people are plotting and executing revenge, a part of their brain that is being activated is the same part of the brain that reacts to reward and pleasure. So in some strange sense, it's pleasurable for us to plan and execute revenge. Now, all this sounds crazy. Why would people be designed to do that? Why would you enjoy revenge? Why would it be actually a good thing? But consider the following thing. Imagine it's you and me on a desert island. I know it's not that an attractive thought, but for now.
I'm working with the
you
image.
And I
Go
are in a
ahead.
desert. And I have a mango. And you're thinking whether you should steal the mango. Now, if you think that I'm a rational person, you would say, well, if it will take Dan 10 minutes to go and get a new mango and I will run far away, he will not chase me. It will not be worth his time. But what if I'm a revengeful, vindictive type? What if you take my mango? I don't care about how long it will take me. I will chase to the end of the world. I will take my mango and all of your bananas. Under those conditions, you will probably not mess with me to start with. And that's basically what happens, is that the fact that we have revenge, even though it seems irrational, actually helps us to coordinate a much more orderly world. That without it, there will be much more crime, but with revenge, we actually coordinate better as a society.
Okay, can you take those examples and put them into a kind of a concrete, something that happened in the last 6 months, maybe using the word subprime mortgages, or something that happened on Wall Street in the last 6 months, to give a real concrete understanding to our viewers about how this actually played out?
How could you connect something like anger and revenge to the Wall Street? I'm not sure it's possible, but let me try. So if you think about this game of the trust game, it's very much as if we played the game with Wall Street. We gave them our mortgages, we gave them our retirement fund, and they've basically betrayed our deep trust in a very, very deep way. They've walked away with our mortgage, right? It's as if player A gave player B the money, but it wasn't $50, it was $500 billion or even more, and they walked away with it. And now there's an incredible sense of unfairness, an incredible sense of revenge, and lack of trust. And I think all of those make it very hard to recover from. So when you remember the first proposal for the bailout, people were outraged with the idea of the bailout. They're still outraged with the idea of the bailout. On top of that, nobody has kind of helped us understand what is this money going from and who made the mistake and who should be blamed here. And as a consequence, nothing has recovered. And if you look at the last 6 to 8 months, you're saying, look, the American government and actually governments around the world have been injecting a lot of money into the market, and nothing seems to be helping. You know, after the Obama bailout package was proposed, the market even went down. How can it be? How can it be with all these stimulus, nothing is really helping? And I think it's because we're not dealing with the real essence of the problem, which is trust. I mean, think for yourself. If you had some money today, where would you put it? Which bank would you trust? Nobody. Now, if I was the economic czar, by the way, what would I do? I would realize that trust is a very hard thing to fix. If somebody betrayed you, you can't turn around the next day and say, oh, you betrayed me last time? I forgive you. Let's start from scratch because you got some government bailout money. That doesn't work. The moment we have the same management at the top, the same people involved, we can't just forgive them and start from scratch. Instead, what I think we need to do is to basically start again. You know, if you had a failed marriage, often it's just easy to scratch it and start again.
So
I think
start
the same
again
thing
means
happens
what?
here. I think we should encourage new banks with new rules, new transparency, no conflict of interest, and new leadership in particular. And I think under those conditions, we might actually trust these new banks. Where the old banks, I think it will take years for us to trust them again. And I think we just don't have the time to wait until we trust them back.
Or the other alternative, Dan, is for all of you to move to Canada, where our banks are considered very solid, among the best in the world, and still make profits. Go figure.
I'm waiting for a job offer.
Let me ask you about the other side of the coin, which is the people who are doing all of this mischievousness. How do they rationalize cheating and stealing?
Yeah, so it turns out we're a fantastic rationalizing machine. Let me tell you a quick story about what we have found about cheating. So for many years now, for a few years now, we've been doing research on cheating. And the way we do it is very simple. We give people a sheet of paper with 20 simple math problems that everybody could solve, but we don't give people enough time. So if you were in this experiment, you would get a sheet of paper, you would get 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, you would say, pass me the sheet, and I'll pay you $1 per question. People solve 4 problems, we give them $4. Other people, we give them a chance to cheat. The same sheet, when the 5 minutes are over, we say, please shred your piece of paper, throw away the pieces, and tell us how many questions you got correctly. Now the average responses go up to 7. Now, interestingly, it's not as if we have a few people who cheat a lot. Instead, we have a lot of people who cheat just by a few questions. Almost nobody cheats all the way, but a ton of people cheat a little bit. Now, from the economic perspective, why do people cheat? It's about what's the probability I'll be caught, how much money do I stand to gain, and how much time will I get in prison? It turns out when we try to manipulate all of those, they don't make much of a difference. What does make a difference? It turns out when we remind people at the moment of temptation about their own morality, we ask them to try to recall the 10 Commandments, which, by the way, they usually can't. But even trying to recall the 10 Commandments eliminates cheating. We ask them to sign an honor code. I understand that this survey falls under the university's honor code. They don't cheat, even if the university doesn't have an honor code. But here's the most interesting thing. We asked the question of how do we get people to cheat more? Now, not that we really want to cheat them more for the experiment. So we had the same condition. A third of the people gave us the sheet. A third of the people tore it up, came to us and said, Mr. Experimenter, I solved X problems. Give me X dollars. We paid them 7. The other third, the more interesting one, they came to us and they said, Mr. Experimenter, I solved X problems. Give me X tokens. We paid them in tokens. Then they walk 12 feet to the side and change a token for $1. Basically, what we did here is we introduced another step between the person and money. And the question is, will this release people from their moral shackles? And to think about it for yourself, imagine, would you take a pencil from work home? How would you feel about it? Compared to how would you feel about taking 10 cents from a petty cash box? And could it be that because the pencil is a step removed from money, it makes people more comfortable? In our experiments, people double their cheating in that condition. So being a step removed from money released people from their moral shackles. Here's the final thing we did. We had a big group of students taking the test, and we prepaid them. So everybody had an envelope with all the money, and we told them at the end to give us back the money they did not make. But we also hired an acting student. Think Madoff. We hired an acting student. We asked him to stand up front after 30 seconds and said, I solved everything, what do I do now? Now, what will everybody else do? You saw somebody, presumably like Madoff, cheat in an egregious way, and the question is, what will everybody else do? The results, by the way, turn out to be very interesting. It depends on what kind of sweatshirt he was wearing. And here is the story. We ran this at Carnegie Mellon at Pittsburgh. Everybody was a Carnegie Mellon student. When the student was, one of them was a Carnegie Mellon student and he cheated, everybody cheated some more. But when the student was from a rivaling university, University of Pittsburgh, and he was wearing a sweatshirt with University of Pittsburgh logo, cheating did not get up, it went down. Now, what do all these tell us about the stock market and this fiasco? It says that when we put people in conflict of interest, when you know it's good for your client when you see the world a certain way, but it's good for you when you see it in a different way, you will be able to see it in a different way. Imagine I gave you $10 million if you could look at mortgage-backed securities as a good product. You will be able to do it. That's the first point, conflict of interest. The more fuzzy and removed from money the medium is, tokens, derivative-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, the easier it is for people to rationalize anything that is good for them. And finally, the moment that they see other people who they consider part of their in-group, or part of the group that they themselves belong to, cheating also becomes easier. Now, if you think about these three components, these are the three components we had in the stock market. Unbelievable conflict of interest, very fuzzy things. I mean, we still don't know how much mortgage-backed securities are worth, and you saw everybody doing the same thing. And all of those are tickets for recipe. And if you think about what are the big lessons, I think one of the big lessons is we cannot allow conflict of interest in the financial system. You know, we have judges. Would you ever dream about giving a judge 5% of their verdict as a payment for their efforts? It's ridiculous. It's as ridiculous to put our doctors and our stockbrokers and bankers in the same conflict of interest situations. And unless we learn this lesson, I don't see how we're going to recover and not make the same mistake again.
This is an angle of economics that I knew almost nothing about before I talked to you, and I got to tell you, this might have been the easiest interview I've ever done in my life. I think next time you're on the program, I'm just going to say hi and let you go, because you know your stuff, sir. Dan Ariely, it's very good of you to join us on the line from Durham, North Carolina, Professor of Behavioral Economics at Duke University. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin was presented by
Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life.
Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca.